fortunate enough to moderate today, entitled The Emergence of New Hardware Technologies Creating Immersive Experiences in a Virtual World. So I am Nathan Pettyjohn. I am the founder and president of the VR AR Association and in a company called Immerse Growth Network, where we do training programs and business growth in sales and marketing. But a lot of my focus has been on the VR and AR ecosystem. So I'll give you just a quick introduction of myself, and then I'm going to bring on stage some of the amazing panelists that we have from HTC, from Magic Leap, and from NuEyes today. So I recently spent the last 3.5 years at Lenovo, where I was leading the global go-to-market strategy for virtual reality and augmented reality solutions. Formerly a venture-backed startup founder and CEO for 10 years. We did a lot of mobile software and also augmented reality type of work. We're one of the key partners with Google's Project Tango, for any of you who are familiar with that. And I'm honored today to be joined by a few of the amazing thought leaders in this industry. So first, I'm going to introduce and bring up on the stage Shen, who's the Senior Director and Global Head of Products at HTC. So Shen, welcome and thanks for joining today. And maybe you can give just a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll move on to the other panelists for intros too.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Nathan. I'm Shen. I've been at HTC for almost 8 years now, and I look after all of our products. So that's hardware and software, with a lot of focus on VR, as that's a lot of my background in HTC as well. Thank you.
Excellent. So next, we're joined by Lisa Watts, who's VP of Product Marketing and Developer Programs at Magic Leap. Lisa, thanks for being here. If you'd like to give a brief introduction of yourself and your great background.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa. I'm at Magic Leap, and I just actually got a new job a few weeks ago. So Nathan didn't have my updated role, but will be heading up the ecosystem programs here at Magic Leap. So working with all our developer partners, our ecosystem partners across the entire stack. I spent 25 years at Intel. Last 5 or 6 years that I was there, I was working very closely with the likes of HTC, Meta, et cetera. We were doing quite a few great programs in the immersive space, including esports leagues, et cetera. And been at Magic Leap now for just about a year and a half. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Lisa. So next, our panelist, Fraser Bowie, is the Chief Product Officer at NuEyes. Fraser, thanks for being here. If you could give us a brief introduction on yourself and your role there at NuEyes.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, so glad to be here. I, spent 11 years at Verizon running an innovation team and delivering AR and VR to their training and operations teams in the last little bit there. And then after leaving NuEyes, was consulting and joined. After leaving Verizon, I joined NuEyes to help them deliver their product. So working responsible for their software and hardware product, bringing them to market and discovering the use cases that they can be used for.
Excellent. All right, so let's dive into some questions, and I'll try to call out specifically one of you to answer these, but some of these are meant for where I'd love to hear your input, all of you. So, but Lisa, let's start with you and talk just a little bit about the Magic Leap 2 that was recently released. And as I think that in general we've heard in the industry, the Magic Leap 2 has a focus on enterprise use cases. So I would love to hear maybe from you about kind of how the device has been uniquely designed for enterprise, and then also, I'm guessing maybe you've had some demand incoming in other types of verticals, and would love to hear kind of how you're navigating the demand that's probably coming from even consumer use cases. So.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I think in 2019, it's just prior to me coming to Magic Leap by about a year, the company decided to pivot the headset to really focusing on the enterprise use cases. There's many reasons for that, not the least of which is that consumers demand price points that are below what is possible in a device like a Magic Leap at the moment. Due to science and physics physics reasons, we have a payload of over 18 cameras and sensors on board the Magic Leap 2, and that allows us to have a very unique way of understanding the world around us, the physical world, obviously. And also, our optic stack is quite unique as well in the industry as far as our ability to do real world view and then the digital combination of content into the real world. So when you think about all those factors, the enterprise really is where those sorts of capabilities are going to get battle tested and used to their full extent. And so it makes sense for Magic Leap to really be focused on on that marketplace to really unlock the potential of workers kind of in the future, really taking 2D compute to 3D compute in the real world. And so we're very excited to see how this is going to continue to get adopted. We've certainly seen some what you would think of your traditional use cases, knowledge capture and training, 3D visualization, pre-visualization of as-built scenarios, etc. But as you might guess, we certainly have lots of inbound around location-based experiences of all sorts, both B2C and consumer-based experiences. So we'll see how it works out. I'm excited to be really on the front lines of seeing those requests come in. But the most thing I'm excited about is how excited developers are about working with the platform since we've really pivoted to be a much more open platform using Android and supporting OpenXR, et cetera. So we're just really in the thick of it right now with the product just being released. And so, in the coming days and months, we'll have a lot more exciting news with our ecosystem. Excellent.
And I've been fortunate enough to try out the Magic Leap 2 and just highly impressed with the quality of the device. And, you're in a very, very exciting role where you get to work with the entire ecosystem and see all these great applications being put on the device. So I'm sure you've got some exciting years ahead of you as you grow the ecosystem. So let's shift to Shen. I want to ask Shen, at HTC, right? You've had a little bit more focus on virtual reality products, but maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the latest devices and kind of how you evolved the VR devices at HTC for this evolving ecosystem, and how that's maybe changed and where your area of focus is in terms of industry verticals.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. In terms of our product portfolio right now, we have three major VR products. So starting from the top, we have Vive Focus 3. It's our very much a core product for business. It's one of the most popular enterprise headsets globally, and gaining a lot of traction also in the LBE space as well. And for something like that, it was we were developing something that we could make kind of like the best of the best when it comes to mobile VR headsets. Even things like down to connectivity, it's the only headset that has Wi-Fi 6E, because enterprises want clean and good solutions. Of course, we also coming a little around that space for PC VR, we also have Vive Pro 2 as well, which is kind of also very much a product that we've done for a while in terms of PC VR. We started with the original Vive, which is like pure PC VR, and it's been a core part of our business. We have a lot of high-end consumers and also businesses that also use that headset. And both of those use one of our latest panels, 5K across both eyes. And I think that a lot of what HTC's DNA is about delivering the best experience that we can give, and those two are very technology driven. And then the last one we have is Vive Flow, which is our immersive glasses. If anyone's seen, like we kind of teased this kind of design a few years back called Proton, and the whole goal is it's very design driven. But because it's design driven, it's very It's designed to be incredibly small, incredibly light. There's compromises that have to be made there. Like, the panels that we use for Pro 2 or Focus isn't going to fit in that. So it's about bringing this really good balance of portability and usability to people. And so that's kind of, that also spans like both enterprise and consumer. As we have just designed it to be more comfortable, and there are just specific use cases like HoloRide that use it to be able to use it in cars, for example. So that's about it for our hardware. And then the way we've kind of approached all of this is, how do we deliver a premium experience, right? We're in a market where premium experience isn't that easy to come by. Like, it's very right now cost driven on the consumer side. So for us, it's about how do we innovate on newer technologies, bring in new things. Like, with Focus 3, earlier this year we added a wrist tracker to do really advanced wrist hand tracking, and just recently last month we released eye and facial tracker for it as well. So we really want to keep developing these technologies and bring it to our existing products as well.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Shen. I mean, HTC has really started to build out, like you said, this portfolio to address all these unique markets. So I think, congratulations to you and your team, because there are not a lot of other companies, if any, in the industry who have built out like this suite of products. But I think we'll start to see that similar if you look at mobile devices, mobile phones, or PCs, for example. There's just dozens of different options. And I will add too, I got to try out the Vive Flow about a month ago when I was in London at a conference. And I guess if I had to sum it up in one word, it would be refreshing, because it was just very elegant how the device is so lightweight, especially if you're used to using VR. It was just really refreshing to put on. It was really easy to use. And so I think you've got something there, especially with the portability now, where you could literally just, fold them up and put them in a bag and off you go. So very, very impressive. So let's move to Fraser. Would love to hear a little bit about your product portfolio with the Pro 3 and the Pro 3E. And I think one of the unique things about NuEyes that I've always admired is you have a low vision applications where you're helping people that struggle with their vision. But then maybe you could also expand on how your devices are addressing like medical and enterprise and even lifestyle verticals as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Yeah, we got our start in low vision. So accessibility, it was taking the idea of carting around big, huge CRT TVs with cameras on them to read books, and how do we get them in glasses? And so what that led us to, is a market that is unfortunately growing, but we're able to help a number of folks based on their disease to be able to see again, read books, live a little more freer life, whether that is the kid in school or whether it is, your parents or your grandparents reading the mail or watching TV. And so, but what that gave us was the opportunity to really learn a lot about, these are users that are using them 7-8 hours a day, right? They're using them to live their life. So we learned a lot about that. And when we started expanding our portfolio of devices, we started pulling out all the electronics out of the headsets themselves. So we're delivering, our headsets are really versatile because they're USB-C connected. And we're really plug and play on just about any of the top line phones, right? Whether that's the Motorola G100 or the Samsung Galaxy S series or OnePlus and others. And it allows us to one, lower the price of the devices themselves because the electronics, the compute and things like that aren't there. But it makes them a lot lighter. And when we look at enterprises, there's been two challenges in enterprise. When I was at Verizon, I was deploying headsets, similar headsets, and there was two challenges. We have a lot of people that are out in the field. So obviously Verizon wants to be able to connect to their own network, and a lot of these devices are Wi-Fi only. So having the ability to connect to a phone and utilizing that, you're always connected. And then the other thing that we ran into at Verizon, and even in some other companies that I had consulted with, was the idea of IT security having a challenge bringing the standalone devices onto their network. And so again, out of just focusing on the user and how they were using it in low vision, it really gave us the opportunity to expand that, making it a plug and play device that still has the capabilities of the IMUs and the different sensors and the cameras and everything like that that we have in our devices, but allows us to make them much more ergonomic for the user and versatile to plug into anything really with the right USB-C connector. And we've seen great success in the typical use cases in the enterprise with remote assistance and step-by-step. We're starting to see, because we're kind of medical adjacent from our beginnings, we see a lot of, we've done a few streams directly from the OR, right? So whether that's a surgical lab, streaming to others in the building to walk them through what was going on, or around the world to show them and enhance the training that was going on. So using stuff like Agora to really enable us to do that over the phones, and the portfolio will only continue to grow. We think we've got a good, idea around the connected device to billions of cell phones that already exist, right? So it's been really good. And then in the lifestyle section, we've started, it is, I know the Vive Flow does something similar, right? It is solving some of those age-old problems of lying in bed and watching TV at the same time, or sitting on a flight and seeing a big screen, right? We're able to do that. But also we've been again, with the power of the phone that we're connected to, start doing location-based content, right? Walking down the street and seeing digital assets and that sort of thing, even with the Pro 3 that doesn't have a camera, because we're able to understand your position and pull that up. So there's definitely some great use cases we're doing now, and with all these devices, right? The possibilities are endless.
Yep, that's really interesting, and your strategy to be adapting to all these different mobile devices. And apologies if you mentioned this, but are they just Android devices, or can iPhones work with them too?
We can connect with the iPhone. We use a Miracast device, right? So similar to what you've maybe seen some others talk about recently. So we have, there's different Miracast devices out there where you can actually connect to iPhones as well. It adds a separate accessory, but it works, right? And we're able to plug into the iPads today and at a minimum display their screen, but also pull up other things and build apps that can help with locations and other things.
Got it. Yeah, because you've got the unique challenge, I would say, of one, having like a heads-up display of just what you would see on the phone, but then also, taking that to another level of immersive technologies and doing things like plane detection and having more of like a 6 degrees of freedom mixed reality experience, right? So there's a unique trade-off there on being, flexible and usable.
Right. And our current device are, 3 degrees of freedom. So we don't do the plane detection and that. We do, we do have hand tracking and things like that. But we're evolving to say, what can we do to add sensors? What can we do? And again, still be able to be powered off, whether it's a phone or a compute device, but something lightweight to keep enhancing that experience.
Got it. All right. So fascinating stuff here. And I wanted to ask a question, that, relates to like the challenges of user adoption with AR headsets, and I guess my question that I'll kind of lead into and then allow any of you to expand on is, is price point really the biggest challenge now with, these thousand or multi-$1,000 devices that we put on our heads, or is there something else? And I know we are seeing, adoption really starting to pick up, but until we get to full on mainstream, whether that's enterprise mainstream or consumer, and maybe Lisa, I'll go back to you and start with you. Kind of, do you see price as a big challenge or barrier, or anything else in the industry that we've got to care for?
Well, I mean, this is a long running question for technology, right? It was one that we faced every day when I was at Intel. When you're making hardware, there's always trade-offs to be made relative to, functionality versus price versus other things. I think the exciting thing that we're seeing now is the number of devices that are coming out. What that means for people doing, manufacturing is that, the silicon providers and the people that are innovating on all of the different parts that we all rely on, it gives them motivation to continue to innovate, right? So as they're innovating at Intel, we used, Moore's law as kind of we'd say every 2 years we were, trying to turn the crank on, increasing the capacity of a processor, for example, while being able to reduce the cost. But that's really a science and innovation problem, right? And I think if you contrast that with the functionality, the applications and ecosystem that surround these various devices, the spectrum that we now have in front of us is, if you remember when you were there in the days of, Google Glass trying to get some traction in the marketplace, where people were very wary of wearing a camera on their head, or if someone was wearing a camera, people were concerned about what they might be recording or seeing. Well, fast forward now, in 2022, these devices now, head-worn displays, virtual reality devices, augmented reality devices, are much more accepted, socially. But I think that we are still in very early days. You'll hear a lot of people talking about kind of the adoption cycles, et cetera. I think it'll be driven by need. Really, what people are willing to pay means it's going to be delivering the value that they need for the job that they need to do. And I think as an industry, we need to be a bit careful of trying to carve up the steak, as I say, to say, oh, well, we know that everybody's fighting for everybody's dollars, but I think there's more than enough room for each one of these scenarios and each one of these devices to, really be oftentimes even in the same environments. We talk about, AR when you're there and VR when you're not, and how are we going to work together to go, make sure that people that are using different kinds of devices, just like they use different kinds of phones, just like they use different kinds of PCs, laptops, et cetera, they're still able to collaborate and work together kind of cross-platform. And so I think that's kind of the metaverse challenge. That's where a company like Agora is so great to partner with. We partner with them as they extend our WebRTC stack. They're providing that very important cross-platform collaboration capability that we all are going to need. So, you'll have a gamer who wants to spend multi-thousands of dollars on his gaming, his or her gaming rig, all the way down to someone who just spends all of their life on their phone. And that's sufficient for them. We're going to continue to see a spectrum of devices at different price points. So I'm not really sure that price point is the thing we should all be focused on. I think for certain use cases, certain devices are going to be more performant or more logical than others. But I think as an industry, we've got a long way to go before we got to worry about, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, competing head to head for the dollars.
Yeah, that was really well articulated. Thank you, Lisa. Makes a lot of sense. Shen or Fraser, do you have anything else that you want to add to that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I would just want to agree and just say I've never been challenged on price over use case or value, right? So if I can save somebody, when I was doing the ROI on doing a large number at Verizon, right? It was very easy to pay for the program that we were looking to introduce in the first year for all the devices for, thousands of people, given what our expectation was in reducing costs. So price never really came into it. It was just, what do we have to, where is that challenge? And if we can solve that challenge or at least help that, we can scale based on how we can help that. And so certainly in the enterprise, I think in the consumer, it's a little different, right? I mean, spending, $400, $500, $600, $700 on a heads-up display to watch movies or play video games and all that. That'll be based on the person's own interpretation of the value, right? So that I think is different. I mean, today we spend, right? I mean, Apple their latest watch, they just released it $800, right? Which is actually quite cheap compared to watches that many people were buying years ago, right? So I think, the consumer, the price point may be a little more difficult and question, but in the enterprise or medical, it's all about the value that the device is delivering.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are limitations in technology as well that needs to kind of be broken through. And that also comes inherently with price. Waveguides still have limited field of view. Pass-through still has trade-offs there as well. And all of that also just has inherent downsides of whether it's weights, thermals, performance, and everything else. And then ultimately, it also comes back down to what everyone said, which is the experience is what's there. I think similar to a lot of other technologies, even smartphones, right? A lot of the early days was kind of bankrolled by enterprise use cases. I think it's a curve that you see in a lot of computing tech adoption. So I think we're just going through that curve as well right now.
Yeah, good points. And I recently read some articles about facial tracking, eye tracking technology, and the importance that that's going to bring to immersive head-worn devices. But right now, like that was one unique technology that I was reading about where it's highly expensive, and so there's a challenge right now in the consumer market more so than enterprise, but in consumer market to hit a price point where people are going to be willing to pay for it. And I mean, even going back to what Lisa said, though, it's always this dichotomy of great technology when it first comes to market is always more expensive, and so how do we get that price point down? So any thoughts just even on that specific use case with like facial tracking, eye tracking technologies? Is that of high importance that you see going forward, and is that still kind of a challenge and barrier that we need to get through from a technology standpoint?
I mean, I would say that we are learning all of the things that eye tracking can help us with, right? That's probably the key thing. And again, as we all kind of push the envelope on leveraging that, the human that is involved in the computing, right? Because we're really putting when you're moving compute from 2D to 3D, and you're moving it from sitting on my desk and locked in a kind of a 2D world to on my person, and where I can now go be performant in the world as I would normally interact. I always give people the example that I'm a gamer. I've got my I've got my preferred titles. I will tell you that I'm not a very good 2D gamer. I don't care on what 2D platform you put me on, but you put me in a Vive, for example, I'm pretty good, right? I can hold my own, because it's just much more natural to me, right? As a person, I'm much more of a spatial, I'm much more operative in spatial, but I was, presenting to a financial services company a few weeks back, and they just couldn't understand why we would take their 3D data from their 2D screen and bring it out to the real world. They just didn't understand why that would be even useful, right? So when you talk about eye tracking in particular, one of the things that we found it's very helpful for, we've added a dimmer layer, because one of the physically in the hardware, because one of the things that's difficult to do when you're doing projection of digital content, as we're doing on the real world, right? Magic Leap has been very unique in its innovations over the last 12 years for its optics, because as Shen and other people know, it's like getting the real world view is and projecting digital content on it is very, very challenging. And we're still innovating and still continuing to improve things like field of view, et cetera. But the thing we have that everyone has the most problem with is projecting basic things like black. So trying to project black onto a digital display, what's the result? I mean, it just goes completely transparent. So that's a problem, right? So then that's where content is not as solid as it needs to be. That's where content disappears, et cetera. So by adding a layer into the actual optic stack itself and providing that ability for content to be projected onto it, either in a segmented way or globally, now we can, blacks are back. I would say black is back, and and we can now project shadows, and so those sorts of things are key to that experience. But one of the main things that we found that is very important is being able to keep those layers tracking together based on where the user is looking, right? So that is, among many other things we see application developers using eye tracking for, as far as Magic Leap is concerned, be able to provide that, performance relative to keeping your content solid by keeping those two layers of the stack together. Eye tracking is, invaluable to us in an experience like that, as well as making sure that people are comfortable. I mean, Fraser talks about that, being able to have a very comfortable experience, being able to wear the device. It's one thing to design it to be lighter and more, more responsive. But the other thing too is just, eye comfort. I mean, we talk about emergence accommodation relative to people getting sick. Some people are going to be able to be absolutely fine. Some people will be in 5 minutes. Some people can't wear some of these devices at all. So being able to have the eye tracking capabilities in there to for comfort reasons, to help accommodate people's different, the different ways their particular eyes and brain functions relative to that digital content. Eye tracking is going to be key to that. And there's, great innovators out there that are working on this for all kinds of different reasons. I think people tend to think about, oh, so I know what you're looking at, so I can serve you up an ad. Well, okay, fine. But it's not really about that for most of us. For Shen and Fraser and myself, for example, at our companies, eye tracking is really much more about comfort and wearability and interaction with the content in a more natural way that's more human. And so that's my very long-winded answer on eye tracking.
No, it's fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say, in addition to that, because it is about, utilizing eye tracking to better understand the user and make them more comfortable and being able to generate content differently and things like that, I think is the key to it. But I come from the advertising world, so eye tracking was used for years. And, what are they looking at? Are they looking at the product? Are they looking at something else and all this? And when I was doing training at Verizon in VR, we didn't use eye tracking, but we head movement, right? We were able to understand the head movement. And one of the use cases I used talked about was what these technologies change in training is if you watched a video, and we did store robbery, right? And one of the questions was, what color sneakers are they wearing? If you watched a video or went through the PowerPoint or whatever, and then answered the question at the end that they were wearing red sneakers, and you got it right, we assumed you got it right, that you were observant. But with this technology, whether it's eye tracking or head movement, Now we know if you were observant or not, right? Now we can really understand, was it a guess or was it real? And being able to, I think, in a training and safety places, adding that layer of information is really helpful to enterprises and others. I mean, think about medical, everything counts, right? If you look away, does the robot stop? Does those sort of things. So I think it is expensive and new, but there's certain applications that can be done today where it's worth the time, money, and effort.
Yep. We could probably have an entire panel discussion for an hour just on eye tracking alone, right? It's a fascinating topic and something really unique. I know we have just only about 5 more minutes left here, and there's a question that came in actually from an esteemed journalist here, Damon Kirtan of XR Today. So he asked a question, and I'll pose it to any of you. He's just asking, which market, enterprise or consumer, do you find is the most receptive to developing and adopting the metaverse, and why so? And maybe if you've got a particular vertical even that you're seeing is really taking off, we could expand on that.
I mean, for us, it's certainly medical. I think they are looking for innovation and really trying to understand what can be done, right? So we have medical companies that are really trying to understand what can be done because they see something. And so I think whether that's, patient care or in the OR or even just 3D data, right? 3D imaging and that sort of thing in the real space or in a much larger screen, if it's just a heads up display or things like that. I think that is certainly a place. I think, we've heard recently the word metaverse is hard to define, or people don't know how to define it. So I think from a consumer perspective, I've been using this thing that I read years ago. Was at one point in the early 2000s, I think it was, Google did a survey in Times Square asking people what a browser was. And it was in the high 80s that no one knew what it was, but yet they all used it to see the internet. And I think that's where the metaverse term is. It's not the term, it is the technology that people don't understand. They're already using it. And so where it might seem a little more difficult in the consumer world because they don't understand the possibilities, which we as an industry need to do a better job at, trying to get that out there. I think places like medical certainly is starting to really understand the possibilities and are jumping headfirst into it.
Great. Shen or Lisa, any closing remarks on that? We've got about 2 minutes left here on the panel.
Yeah, I would say the way we approach metaverse, it's not a new thing. Like everything we interact with our smartphones, with online gaming, is all considered in this broad category of metaverse already, right? And like, not to jump too far back into eye tracking and facial tracking, it's one of the reasons why we've been developing that technology as well, because you want to be able to have your virtual avatar represent you and people feel like you're actually next to them, right? And I think there are a lot of key technologies there that's still needed. But in terms of who's adopting VR in general, in terms of our customer base, like one thing we're seeing growing massively is LBE and entertainment in general. A lot of the uses of B2B2C, and like a lot of them are growing a lot faster than they expected it to as well. And it's growing a lot faster than we expected it to. And we've been providing solutions for that, and we didn't expect so much demand for it. So from our perspective, we're seeing massive growth in the enterprise space there.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think the surprising thing for us, I mean, I agree with what Fraser said. Obviously, medical is a space that everybody's very interested in. I think the the knowledge capture and sharing and training category, there are so many industries where, and I think COVID actually kind of accelerated this, where there was such a big gap in people being with each other and knowledge sharing and transferring information. The kind of the broad category across enterprise, and I think this will very much go into education and other potentially be something that's leading out into B2C from a consumer perspective, is that ability to kind of capture information and knowledge and be able to pass that on in a more scalable way, whether you call it training or whatever nomenclature you want to use for your industry, right? But that knowledge capture, I think in a lot of industrial scenarios where people have been in their jobs 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and they have that intrinsic knowledge of how they do their jobs. How do you give them a very natural way to capture and share that information in something that can be preserved for a very long period of time? I think we'll find this in many different industries as being a key scenario that, from an enterprise perspective, is going to continue to grow.
Excellent. Well, the event producers have given us a little bit more time here. I think it's because it's such a fascinating discussion, which it is. But so we do have a few more minutes here to ask just a couple more questions. And one of those that I wanted to pose out there, you hear a lot of talk about blockchain technologies, and I wanted to get any of your perspective, as we see more value coming of digital assets and things. Is that playing into your product strategy right now at all, or is it still a ways out until you start looking at blockchain? I know that's a big question because blockchain means there's a lot that goes on behind that. But if any of you would like to share your thoughts on that, it would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so here where I think blockchain can be really valuable, right? Being able to take my information, my expertise, my whatever with me, right? Using blockchain to secure my personal information in these environments and allow people access to certain things, right? So, for instance, I think one of the things I've certainly discussed with a few people in the industry is, if I'm going through a training course and it's Verizon that pays for it, and I go through the safety course and everything like this, and they have all that data, and I leave Verizon, I go to AT&T, where does that data go? There's no proof I've taken it. If I can start integrating this, and again, there's certain proprietary information to the individual companies and individual things, but if I can start using blockchain to start building these, I don't want to call them profiles, but these data segments that I can say are mine versus a company's or versus the public's or that sort of thing, and then allow myself to bring it into different environments, again, will feel more natural, right? It will become more of what I do every day, right? I bring the things I want to bring with me, and there's a lot of stuff that I think today, one, we don't know what it is that's being captured, or two, it's frustrating when it's captured in one place and not the other. And can blockchain help solve some of that? I think so, and I think that's where the power of it is. I mean, it doesn't need to be this company needs to be talking to this company. It needs to be I myself can say, hey, I want to look the same everywhere. I want to do the same thing, whatever it is, right? And use that sort of blockchain technology for that stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. And to expand on that a little bit, I was recently, we had a discussion at another conference on this, where immersive technologies kind of increase the value of our self-identity in a virtual world versus if we're just on 2D screens. And so whether that means like clothing that our avatars wear or how we look and are represented in this immersive world starts to add some emphasis on why all of that identity is needed. So, and that was kind of a talk that we had around why blockchain becomes a little bit more important. But Shen, I'd be interested too in your perspective too, like in more of a VR virtual world. Are you seeing that becoming much more prominent in your product planning, or not?
Yeah, we have been working on blockchain for a while, and especially right now, what we're calling Viverse, our take on the metaverse is a lot of what we're doing will have blockchain elements into it. I think it's also about giving people the choice, right? Like there are benefits of using the blockchain as what Fraser mentioned, basically having this public ledger of that you can take across anywhere. But I think that the downside of that is right, like, but you have that, but you still require someone else to integrate that, right? So how do we build these systems out that it's beneficial to have something like that? And I think there's also the argument of blockchain, especially on the proof of work side, being not very environmentally friendly. So even we have a Vive Arts team. Even they have encountered that with a lot of artists who are more who more care about the that aspect of crypto. So it's about how do we get the right technologies of blockchain into these systems, and also how do you put down all what drives an economy, right? Like how do you put all of that stuff around it, while also not trying to force everyone to use it. So it's a very fine balance that we've had to put a lot of work into.
Yeah. And Lisa, you know, with your focus on the ecosystem, right? There are a lot of partners that you deal with. Curious, are you seeing much demand like coming to you to say, hey, we want to incorporate a blockchain piece of technology onto the Magic Leap 2 ecosystem, or is that still kind of nascent in the industry?
Well, I'm not sure that I would take a position relative to blockchain in particular. But what I am excited about relative to Magic Leap and our approach to the hardware side of the house is the openness of the platform, right? So, trying to make sure that we're giving access to developers and, solution providers to the capabilities of the platform in a way such that they can do that innovation. And then we really see it as kind of more of a shared responsibility model relative to, we're giving access to these things, and we would expect them to, treat them with the respect that they should, and the people that are using the devices with the respect that they should, et cetera. And whether they do that via, blockchain, via or other, technologies for taking care of, people's data and information, really that's the ecosystem needs to step up for that piece of it, right? What our responsibility, I think, is what we're trying to really push is the openness, the ability to connect the device to any ecosystem that makes sense to you, that you need for your particular solution, your particular job, being able to connect it and secure it to any cloud infrastructure that makes sense for you, to be able to deploy and your applications to many different app stores, or your deploy those applications yourself. So really handing that control back over to the ecosystem and the application developers. Magic Leap is not deploying its own cloud infrastructure. We're not deploying our own application store. We're not deploying our own ID system. Those things are going to be things that we are enabling the ecosystem to be able to do around the platform. Now, that's something that is probably going to cause a lot of stress to some application developers, but at the end of the day, it also provides an amount of freedom as these different ecosystems and different methodologies spring up, and hopefully we hope fires the imagination and the ability to be a more collaborative player across platform. Again, in that AR when you're there, VR when you're not. I mean, if there's an HTC on the other end and I'm in a Magic Leap, well, why can't Shen and I work together in the environments by which we choose to work in? So how blockchain feeds into that, I think, is in our particular scenario is going to be how the ecosystem. And ask me in a year from now, Nathan, I'll kind of probably have a better answer as far as how people are going to use those things. But we have many metaverses and lands and all these other things that people are looking to be able to do. We got a long ways to go, and I really agree with Shen wholeheartedly. On the ecosystem impact, or the environmental impact of everything that we do is something that we have to consider, whether it be blockchain or anything else. I mean, we're as citizens of the world and bringing computing to people who are we hope continue to be great citizens of the world. We all have a shared responsibility in that as well.
Excellent. So last question that we'll end with, and Lisa, you kind of mentioned it, to talk about something that's inspiring. I'd love to hear from each of you, like, just what is your favorite experience that you've had on one of your devices? And Fraser, I'll put you in the hot seat first.
Personally, I love using it on the plane. So that's the simple thing. No, I really, when doing the surgical labs and being able to stream this around the world and really get that input from others. I was in DC and we were streaming a surgical lab around the world, and being able to have the comments on the videos and talk about what was going on, and then also have other conversations while the surgeon and the folks in that OR were doing their work was phenomenal. And it gets me thinking of how, we see it on these ultra unrealistic dramas on TV where it's, the pilot dies and the 12-year-old gets in the plane because he used to play video games and is talked down. But the idea that becomes a reality, the idea that we are really truly going to, with this technology, make, in my belief, the superhuman in each and every one of us, I think is fantastic. And so being able to see those connections and having that live is fantastic.
Excellent. Shen, what's your favorite experience that you had on one of your devices?
God, there are so many. As I mentioned, I think I'll give two because it's kind of hard. In mobile VR, because we've recently been looking at a lot of LBEs, I think being able to go to one of Sandbox VR's locations recently in London with a bunch of my colleagues and just have a really cool collaborative experience, like that was really fun. And I think it was more fun than we all expected it to be, and it brought somewhat more teamwork than we usually even get that deep into at work. So it was like just even those kind of experiences, like you're fighting against zombies that don't exist, but it brings people closer together, even with a simple 30-minute experience. And I think for me, the most impactful change that's for me personally was during the pandemic, I started using VR for fitness. Couldn't go to the gym, right? And just like half an hour to an hour a day was enough. And, of course, diet as well. Was allow me to lose 12 kilos, so 25 pounds in the space of 3 months. So I think that for me was the most impactful as well.
Awesome. And Lisa, we'll end with you and your favorite experience.
For me, the ability to collaborate over space and time and actually be in my own environment when doing so, I think has been the most, impactful and exciting development. And, that's why I was really excited when, Agora reached out to me to become, be part of this panel, because they're doing such important work relative to, the communication layers that are so important to us as human. And I think, Shen mentioning about the pandemic and working from home and, that human interaction the capacity to have that in any way, shape, or form, and to be able to, for Magic Leap, obviously for us to be able to share the places and spaces that we're in with others in a real-time way is something that, we're just on the cusp of really unlocking this as a capability, and I'm super excited with what I'm seeing so far that's coming to the table. So I think that's my favorite.
That's great. Well, thank you every one of you for your time today, and it's a perfect way to round out the conversation about how this immersive technologies that we're all building is bringing us together and allowing us to communicate better and more in an immersive fashion. So thanks again, everyone. It was a pleasure talking with you today, and I look forward to following you and seeing what else is on the horizon that you're creating. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
all.
Nathan.
Yep. Bye-bye.